of mean difference. Let's we discuss about the test of mean difference. In the group of the test of mean difference, there are two types. The first one is we call it as the parametric, and the second one we call it as the non-parametric. So in the parametric case, we have the three tests, right? The first one is the independent t-test. We call as the independent t-test. The second one is the paired t-test, and the last one is a one-way analysis of variance. However, for the non-parametric case, we have the Mann-Whitney test, Wilcoxon sign rank test, and also the Kruskal-Wallis test. Okay? Alright, so the requirement for the test of mean difference. Alright, look at this is the important part. Alright, the requirement how we choose. Either we want to use the parametric test or the non-parametric test. Alright, so the requirement to use the test of the mean difference, the normality distributed data. So means that your data must be normal. If your data is normal, you can use the parametric test, right? Either you choose the independent test, paired sample test, or one-way ANOVA. If your requirement is not met, right? Your assumption is not met, so you need to use the non-parametric test. In this part, I will discuss about the test of the mean difference for parametric groups. Okay, look at for the first test is the independent sample t-test. So what is the independent sample t-test? Is the two sample. Alright, so the independent sample t-test is a two sample test of the null hypothesis when the means of the two normality distributed population are equal. Right? So there are some objectives to test for the independent sample t-test. The first one is to compare the mean of a numerical variable in two independent samples. Right? And then we have to determine whether the differences between the two observed mean exist, the difference that would be expected by chance. And the last one, to determine whether the difference between means of the two sets of numerical variable is significant. Right? The most important part that you need to know is before starting to employ independent sample t-test is to make sure the dependent variable from the independent sample is numerical. Before we go further about the independent sample t-test, we need to know the assumptions of the independent sample t-test. So there are 5 assumptions need to comply before we perform our independent t-test. Right? The first one is the independent variable or the test variable must be numerical. The second one, the sample is drawn randomly from the populations of interest. The third one, the observation should be independent. This means that the sampling unit should appear in only one group. Number 4 is normally assumption, means that the distributions of the data for each group must be normally distributed. It means that in the assumption number 4, if the data are more than or equal to 30, right? Your data is equal or more than 30. Normality is assumed based on the agreeable central limit theorem. If your data is less than 30, right? We should check the normality distribution using histogram, box plot, and so on. Alright, and the last assumption, both groups should have the same variance. So means that your group must homogeneity of variance. So the important part, you need to remember that the assumption number 1 until number 3 in the red box here should be done at study design and sampling method stage. Alright, this is the types of data requirement. So we have the two types of data requirement. Number 1 is the one independent variable, where the one independent variable you need should be in categorical variable with only two levels. For example, intervention group and control group, male group and female groups, right? So one independent variable. So the second one is the one dependent variable. It should be continuous, right? In the one dependent variable, the data should be in continuous variable. For example, students score, PEFR score, and also weight. Look at the example for the independent sample t-test. In this topic, we use the penguin dataset from the Palmer Penguin Library and MTCAS dataset. Just we go to only one dataset, penguin dataset. So the step by using the independent sample t-test is we have the 5 steps. The first one, we need to state the hypothesis. The second one, checking the assumption. Third one, performing R code, interpreting and conclusion. And the last one, we present our result. By using the penguin dataset, right, we want to know, is there any difference on mean, bill length, bill depth, and flipper length between male and female penguin for elderly species? Alright, so based on the step of the independent sample t-test, we need to state our question and also the hypothesis. Alright, so the research question is the mean bill length significantly different between male and female elderly penguin? Alright, you can see the null hypothesis here is there is no significant difference on mean bill length between male and female elderly penguin. Alright, so you need to list one by one the hypothesis and also the research question. And then after we state our research question and also the research hypothesis, we need to checking our assumption, the checking assumption. Alright, so look at here, the checking assumption. There are one dependent variable and one independent variable, where dependent variable is the numerical and independent variable must categorical with two levels. Alright, so the dependent variable is the bill length and the independent variable is the gender, sex, is a male and female. So the sample are independent, is not related, and next is normality checking. This is the syntax or the code according R for the normality checking at the left hand side. This is the coding. You can follow the coding how to check the normality. Alright, the first one, the library and library for the the three groups. Alright, and then you selecting only elderly species. Alright, and then you split the data set into male and female based on your objective, based on your hypothesis. Right, and then you testing the normality using Lilliefors test, and then you can come out, you can get the output for the Kolmogorov for the normality test. You can see the output or the result for the normality. Based on the output for the normality test, the Kolmogorov test, alright, we can interpret our result. So either your result is a normal or not. Okay, alright, so based on the result here, alright, based on the Lilliefors test, we can conclude that the distribution of bill length for female right, is 0.0709114. Right, you can see where the result here for the D statistic is here. Right, so here, this is your result. With the p-value is 0.4840. So here is our p-value. Okay, and female, alright, so and female is a result 0.07408 with the p-value 0.4143 are normally distributed since the p-value for male group was less than 0.05. Your p-value in the output, your p-value is 0.4143, means that it's greater than 0.05. So your p-value is less than 0.05. Alright, so you can see the output, either we can interpret normal or not. This is according how to come out your graphical presentation. Alright, so for the first one, maybe it's a ggplot. Alright, so you want to come out the histogram. So this is the coding or the syntax how you come out your graphical presentation. This is the result for the graphical presentation. I come out is the histogram. Alright, the histogram showing distribution of beat length for male and female Adelie penguin. Right, so beat length for the male and also for the female. So how to interpret every output? At each output, we need to interpret the result. So how to interpret our figure? How to interpret our histogram? So based on the histogram, we can conclude that the beat length for male and female were approximately normally distributed. Right, we can see the histogram here. So approximately normal distributed. Right, so we can see the histogram. Another assumption we can checking is the homogeneity of variance. So here, the first one we call the library car. And then we can get the output here, alright, so based on our syntax here. This is a test of the homogeneity, alright, we call it as a leaving test, alright, so this is the syntax for the leaving test, and this is the output for the leaving test, alright, so we need to interpret our result. According to the first one, according to the hypothesis we stated, so we have the null hypothesis, the variance are equal for the both group, and the alternative hypothesis is the variance are not equal for the both group. So how to interpret our result? Based on the leaving test for homogeneity of variance, the p-value, so where our p-value, alright, the p-value is here, alright, it's a p-value. Alright, the p-value was more than 0.05. You can see the output here. Our p-value is 0.6445. Okay, which conclude that the variance are equal for both group. Okay, with the F statistic here 0.2138 and the p-value and also the degree of freedom. Alright, so we need to explain one by one output appear in the result here. Since the assumption for the conducting independent sample t-test were met, so now we can proceed to performing the test of independent. If not met, we cannot proceed the independent sample t-test.